Now, I don't know if you knew this, fun fact, that the initial chorus for Crazy was going to be, you spin me right round, crazy, right round like a record, crazy, right round, round, round.
Oh.
But there was some sort of copyright issue. I don't know what for.
She could have just paid the sample fee or something.
I think what she settled on, so I let Crazy take a spin, then I let Crazy settle in. I think that kind of has, it doesn't roll off the tongue quite the same way, but it's nice. It's different.
It's nice. It's unusual.
It's common.
It's common.
Is that crazy enough for you? Is that opening crazy enough for you?
Gotta keep it
Keep it gay, keep it gay, keep it
I
gay.
don't even know what I'm trying to say. Keep it fresh. Yeah. These openings, gotta keep the audience interested.
We only have 2 left after that one.
Wow.
Yeah, we only have 2 more episodes to make of season 1.
Plus our bonus recap episode.
This is your posse bonus where we're gonna talk. Yes, yeah, fair.
Yeah.
The what is it? The reunion episode where Andy
we'll have the
Andy Cohen will come in and
immediate reunion episode.
Mm-hmm. That's my opinion.
Hi, I'm Michael Earp.
And I'm Bailey Turner.
Welcome to Michael's Walk.
The podcast.
Michael's Walk is a road trip, a search for something. Spoilers, it's myself, and it was inside all along.
If only it were that simple.
Driven by Tori Amos's album, Scarlett's Walk, I'm recreating the journey Scarlett took in its 20th anniversary year.
I'll also be there.
With the loving and patient,
always patient,
support of Bailey and Teague Lee, 3 trans queers set out across America.
That's 33 states in 55 days.
To connect with the songs, the land that inspired them, and the fans inspired by the songs. We'll talk music, travel, healing, and hope as we ask the questions, how do I heal from 15 years of coercive control and manipulation?
And what role does the music we listen to play in our own relationship narratives?
We've self-produced this podcast and trip.
You can support us via GoFundMe.
For the full story, head to michaelerp.net.
We come to you from strange territory in Kalispell.
The Lonesome Dove Ranch, which we did mention at the beginning of the last episode, which we did just before we ate dinner, and we have just eaten dinner.
But we're going to pretend that we've transported you across time and space.
Yeah. Get a little crazy with us. Maybe.
Bum, bum, bum.
And is this where we accidentally do an entire episode on Britney's Crazy?
It could be. Or Seal's Crazy.
Seals. Or Alanis's cover of Seal's Crazy.
It's nothing crazier than that. Or Gnarls Barkley's Crazy. Oh, shit.
My goodness.
This
ridiculous opening belies the importance of this song for both of us.
Yes, that's true. Forgive us, we just had a really incredible dinner, but we had an unexpected dinner guest who just kind of boggled our minds a little bit with his reflections on life and on the pursuit of happiness and...
Yeah, like asking questions like, so what are your tools for happiness?
It was fascinating. It was interesting.
It was really, really interesting.
Yeah, shout out to
Neil. Working class Neil.
Like, just working class Neil.
Who
was a whole bunch.
When I put us down for dinner and said, the dinner experience, I didn't know what I was signing us up for.
What we bargained for. But here we are anyway.
Right.
Let's get into it, shall we?
Let's get into it.
Our time with Crazy was between, our journey from Aspen and through...
Right up to Big Sky. And then Three Forks isn't technically on the map. Oh, it is a little bit. Actually, I think Three Forks is on the Strange...
The Strange Loop, you might say.
Strange Loop. Yes. So basically, we're saying our drive from Aspen to Big Sky covers that sort of territory. We didn't drive all the way down through Phoenix to Tucson, where Scarlett did.
Where Crazy abandons Scarlet.
Yes. Crazy as a personification of a male that Scarlet meets and has a wild time with, kicks off those heels, and lets Crazy take a spin.
There's a hot bath in the desert with a cowboy.
Yeah.
Lucky girl.
Yeah. And like, let's
Where's
be honest. We can relate to the willingness to let a cowboy take over.
Let Crazy take a spin. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. But, you know, the things that we got to see, I mean, we had a great day of really just taking off, and it really did feel like a massive shift, you might say. Sorry, I just dicked into my Kiwi accent for a second. You're not going to cut that out, are you?
No.
We really...
People need to see the real you.
Yeah. I need to talk about it. We really just took off from Aspen in the morning and found ourselves at the Grand Tetons and Jenny Lake. You know, and
But even before we got to the Grand Tetons,
true.
there was this, I don't know what it's called. I tried Googling it while we were driving through it, but the reception was so bad. So I just pinned the map and I'll look into it when we get back. But we came up to the top of these mountains, and then all of a sudden we were driving across this plain where you couldn't see any mountains, but you knew we were at the top of mountains. And it honestly felt like we were driving across some sort of heavenly platter or something. I don't know.
It was yeah. I love that you referred to a plateau as a heavenly platter. That makes us happy. Just a silver platter. It was a lot like that. Like we did go, you know.
And then the next minute we crossed into a national park,
valley,
and all of a sudden we were in this like lush valley, and it was just very sudden from one to the next.
It was amazing.
And then we got to the Grand Tetons, and wow.
You know, I mean, like it's we've just never seen anything like it. Like it's just, they just don't make it like that in Australia. And
yeah, we have mountains and ranges, but not the scale that they have here.
Yeah, and like there's something very particular about, you know, I just remember like looking at everything going, I remember when I was 9 watching Homeward Bound, and like just it just all these rappers remind me of cats in boxes and like, you know, grand adventures by, you know, Labradors. But it really...
Milo and Otis.
Yeah, and yeah, all those kind of animal movies of the 90s that they stopped making because we actually don't support cruelty of... Anyway, off topic. There's something so romantic about these landscapes, and so it really did feel like that territory of crazy where you really can get lost in an idea about a relationship or, you know, your fantasies about a person. There is just something so awe-striking about those places. Yeah, and then we sort of got into Yellowstone, and the first day was just this incredible vista after incredible vista.
Beautiful geysers.
We got to see Old Faithful.
And the Grand Prismatic Spring. I got it out.
You did?
Grand Prismatic Spring was incredible on so many levels. Like the colors that all of those minerals were producing, but then the heat of the steam and the sulfur smell billowing about with the freezing mountain air, like
washing into ice cold rivers and rapids, you know, with these gigantic, you know, soaring mountains around us. It is so humbling, and you really do get. I know I found myself getting overwhelmed a number of times. And I think by the time we left Yellowstone, we both. I was journaling about it earlier that I just felt chock full. I was like, I'm a bit full to the brim here, and my cup runneth over. And what was lovely was it felt like a really lovely cup to be overflowing from all these beautiful natural glories that we'd experienced, as opposed to hustle and bustle and lights and fatty food. And
we felt overwhelmed, but rejuvenated at the same time.
Absolutely that. And it created, you know, the openness of the landscape, I think facilitated us to be really open with each other and open about what we wanted in this, in this time we have left, and just be really in the spirit of where we are, as opposed to having to constantly think about what we're doing next, or planning this as many steps ahead as we can, or oh, we've got this many things to tick off the list. It suddenly became about let's just drive and let's just see where we wind up and what takes our fancy, and we'll just pull over.
Yeah, if you see something you want to stop at, pull over. That was our motto all the way through.
If you're hungry, eat something.
If you're tired, pull over. But also, the day we left Aspen, I started trying to write in the car while Bailey was driving. And I found myself really struggling and halting, stop-starting, pushing words onto the page, it felt like. But then I kind of just had to stop for a second and be like, Michael, no one needs to read this. This isn't for anyone but you. And so then I was like, well, stuff this. I'll just write whatever the hell I want. And I wrote a whole bunch of poems back to back and loved them for what they are in the moment. God knows if anyone will actually read them. But then, in the middle of all of that, Bailey sets this writing challenge.
Well, we'd been playing a whole bunch of Alanis on our way, because this is like, we've had such a beautiful time. I've kind of lost track of what went where, but it was on our way to...
From Denver to Aspen, we were playing.
But during... We were listening to Supposed Former Infatuation Junkie from front to back.
From front to back, yeah. Right.
And we were driving around this kind of area where wild horses were known to be roaming.
Oh, yes.
And Michael, it was a surprise for me, because I love horses, and wild horses is it's a very particular part of a personal myth, and it was such a beautiful surprise that Michael set up, but we weren't sure we were going to see any. And then we did spot some, just in the distance. There's about 5 of them, and they were just there. It was stunning. So we had this beautiful kind of experience, but we'd end up talking about Unsent, which is a song by Alanis Morissette on that album, Supposed Former Infatuation Junkie, where she just writes a series of short missives to old flames and people that she may have, had interest in, says things that she may not have had the chance to say when there was the opportunity. And so I set the idea of like, well, what if we write our own? We'll kind of fit the meter that Alanis sets as best we can, and let's write, some letters, to some people who are important in our lives.
Yeah.
And so that's what we set about doing, and it was awesome.
It was such a great experience, and for me it really tied into what I'm doing here on this trip. Not that I couldn't bring myself to write one to the particular X that most of what this trip is about, but basically every other person that's been of some kind of romantic or affection significance in my life, I wrote one of these verses to. And even more so important was the fact that one of them was the person who I associate crazy with, which I figured, seeing we're talking about Crazy, the song, I may as well tell that story. And then I thought, after I tell the story, I'll read my little bit of writing.
Yes, please.
So first, I'll start with the story. I will try and keep it as succinct as possible, because I really could go on about it. In fact, I wrote a YA novel about it and spent 9 years developing it. So I literally could talk about it for days.
18 years deep into this one.
Yeah. But basically, right after I had ended my relationship with my first ever boyfriend, not because I felt any animosity towards him, but just because I didn't feel like it was going anywhere, and so I just thought, let's just be friends. And so we ended.
How old were you?
I was 17. Yeah, that's a whole story in itself. The first boyfriend I ever had was the first out gay boy that I'd ever met. And we also kissed at a party before we'd even spoken. So it was all very rush into it in that teenage kind of way, when your friends go, oh, he's gay and he likes you. And then all of a sudden you're kissing, and then you're dating for 3 months, and then you're like, actually, that was fun, but it doesn't need to go on. And that was good. But 1 week after, I bump into someone who that boyfriend had actually introduced me to at a party once. And so I had assumed they were friends, and then this person reappeared in my life in another situation and was incredibly charming and attentive to me. And before I knew it, we had exchanged numbers and were calling and chatting all the time. And then within days, we were boyfriend and boyfriend. And it was this whirlwind relationship, particularly from my perspective. He was 1 year older than me, so he was 18. He was out of school and had a job and a car, and he was a budding musician. He was in a pop group and auditioned for Australian Idol and got through to like the top 20 the first year that Australian Idol was on. Anyway, that goes on and on and on. I could go. But
you were he was very captivating.
He
and
was.
had a
He
whole
was
bunch.
going places, and it seemed like he wanted to take me along for the ride, because we spent so much time literally driving around the Central Coast where I grew up. He wasn't really out to his parents and I wasn't out to mine, and so the time we spent together was in his car, literally just driving from end to end of the Central Coast. And so that's another reason why Crazy sort of plays really well into the story surrounding him for me. And it was a really intense relationship in that we texted and called, and he was saying things to me like when I'm finished school, we can get an apartment together in Terrigal. And, you know, there was all of this promise of future. And I had explained to him where I was coming from with my own sort of personal boundaries, I guess. I had grown up in a very Christian household, and after coming to terms with my sexuality, I had promised myself that I wouldn't have sex until I was 18. This was a mixture of not wanting to do anything before I felt I was ready for it, but also this was my gay take on wait for marriage. I figured if I can wait until I'm legal in the eyes of the country, the law, then I would at least know that I'm ready for it. And I had the same rule for myself when it came to drinking. I had always told myself that I didn't want to drink until I was 18. It wasn't a big deal for me. Most of the time I was the designated driver anyway, so it really wasn't a thing, an issue for me. And my first boyfriend, it wasn't an issue for him either. We had a very amiable and sexually active, in as far as my limits would allow, relationship. And this guy was very supportive in that as well. But then there was one night where he said that a few of his friends was having a sleepover, and did I want to come round and join them? And I thought, yeah, this will be great. And so he picked me up in his with his 3 girlfriends in the car, and so we were all squished in. This is the first time I'd met them. And on the way to whoever's house it was, whose parents were out of town, they pulled in and stopped at the Bottle-O and bought several bottles of Passion Pop.
Oh, God.
The classiest of drinks around.
Yeah. We all went there. We all had to do it.
And anyway, we went, and it was a good fun night. We all had a laugh. When I was offered a drink, I said, no, I don't drink, but, give me straight cordial. It'll do the same thing, get me real silly. And so basically I was drinking cordial, not straight. I was just, cordial.
We know you're not straight, Michael.
It's true.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. But somewhere along the line, Passion Pop was being mixed in with my cordial. I probably allowed it. I don't know. I honestly don't remember that part of the evening. But I do remember distinctly at one point someone offering me Passion Pop as just straight up as a drink. And I figured, well, I've been drinking it mixed in this far, I may as well. which led to drinking it straight from the bottle because that's what everyone was doing at that point in the evening. And then at one point my boyfriend and I said goodnight to the others, and we went into the room we were sharing, and we ended up having sex. And I was quite intoxicated, but I know that I didn't say no to anything. Like, I know that in the moment I was very caught up in the sensation and this feels great, and we're doing so well as a couple. Like, in the 3 weeks we've been together, everything felt great, and so I lent into it. But then afterwards I started questioning what I'd done and how it had come about, and I got really sort of upset, and he kept on saying things like, I've got to get up early, like, let just try and get some sleep. And I was literally sitting there in the bed next to him crying, and he would just try and sleep and rolled over to sort of move away from me trying to feel a connection with him. And then at one point he's like, just go to the bathroom, like, you'll feel better. And so I did, and I was crying in the bathroom, and then I came back, and I remember just staying up most of that night crying, and then trying to like stifle my crying so as to not disturb him. And in the morning, he barely said much at all to me, and then he's like, do you want me to drop you home? And of course, like, that was the only thing I wanted at that point. Yes, please drop me home. Not to mention, I didn't know how else I would have gotten home, seeing he drove me there in the first place.
Yeah.
But we barely spoke on the way home. I do remember saying to him, today would be our 3-week anniversary. And his response was, you're such a little weak counter. And I was like, okay. Clearly that, like, he was not in the mood to talk, and so I just let it be, and the rest of the drive was in silence. And then I got home and cried more. And then followed a week of radio silence from him. He did not reply to any of my texts or any of my calls. A few times I tried calling, and one time one of his girlfriends who was there that night answered the phone, and I was like, oh, is he available? And no, he's in the shower. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, can you get him to call me? And I didn't get a call back. And then, so a full week after, I get a text message from him saying, I just don't think it's going to work out. I've got to focus on my career or whatever. I don't know. Whatever the text said, I think I have it written down somewhere because I kept a journal of this entire relationship word for word.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, it really destroyed me because he had built it up to be something very much that it wasn't. And then on top of all of that, when I talked to my first boyfriend again later, he was really sort of pissy with me, and I couldn't really understand why, because I was a naive teenager. But then obviously getting together with someone else a week after breaking up with him was not a good look. But on top of that, it turned out that they had this kind of, I don't know, rivalry going on. And so on some level, my interpretation of all of this was that the guy I lost my virginity to only did that to prove that he could get something from me that my first boyfriend couldn't. Right. And so that just made me feel even worse. And so that's a very long-winded story. I said I'd be quick and have gone on for 12 minutes now, but long-winded version of how crazy, where the chorus is, first let's just unzip your religion down, just so clearly speaks to me, because yeah, I did kick off my shoes. I did settle in for the ride, but it left me so sore on the other side. It carried on for, I honestly can say that I was still raw about that for a decade. Whew. So, I'm just going to read you my unsent. Dear Ryan, you were the star henned on your arm, already fading, the light gone before I knew it. I was so swept up in you, I slid right into your unrequited voicemail. I gave you far more than I intended, and I felt the rawness for a decade, 3 teenage weeks, and realizing I wasn't part of your plan.
My goodness, those formative experiences, it just can't be underestimated how much of an impact they have on our lives. You've obviously told me this story before, but hearing it again and how like it sort of finally gave me a chance to kind of sit in it and be like, how would that have felt for me? And how when a relationship causes you to put aside your morals and it's not just about the betrayal of that person, it's about that self-betrayal, you know, like where you go against what you want for yourself and the kind of life you want to live, and you give it up, and even before you find out the full treachery of it all, it still feels awful, and you know where I learned that from.
I was hurting in that self-betrayal that very night.
Yeah.
And that was at a time that I still thought that this was going to continue, and I needed to sort out what was going on in my own head. And then it turned out
that response didn't, prompted him to behave in an immature way as well. He was 18 years old. Teenage boys are a little bit shit, as it turns out.
Yeah.
In my experience of losing my virginity was somewhat similar. I was 19 and he was, I want to say 23. I was in love with him and I had been for years. And it was kind of a very similar scenario actually looking back. I was at a games night with a bunch of friends, and there was kind of a bit of a known dynamic where I would crash with him, like I would sleep in his bed with him. Because as a friendship, we'd always been sleeping together since we were, younger. But obviously, we're all adults now. And this one particular night, him and I were sort of, we would fool around a little bit, really innocent stuff. And then this one particular night, he went to escalate that, and I thought, oh, this is bad. This is not going to be good. Like, he doesn't, it was like this inner monologue of like, he doesn't want to do this. Like, he doesn't actually love you. You know that. And you don't want to do this with someone who doesn't love you. But at the same time, I was like, well, I don't know who else I would trust to lose my virginity to. But I said to him that, there needed to be, condoms and lubricant if it was ever going to go any further. And I used that as like a bluff. And he called my bluff and went to go get these things that he ended up not using. And I kind of sat in this space of like, oh, I've done it now. Like, I have to put my money where my mouth is. And even though I didn't want to, even though I knew it was a bad idea, even though I had this sort of internal monologue going, get out of this, like this is going to be bad. And then it was bad, and then it was painful, and that was where the sort of consent came out the window, and it ended up being a violating experience. And so, I definitely relate to Crazy on that front, and I've had, unfortunately that wasn't the first, sexual assault I experienced. And so Crazy is very much about those things, is when you kind of drop your own moral compass for the sake of something that you think is going to be one way, but they kind of pull the switch on you at the last minute because it turns out that it was all a setup to get what they wanted.
I was alone when I knew it was real.
That's it. But for me, this song has taken particular pertinence because of the last relationship that I was in, and how special that really was, but also how coming out of it changed a great deal of things about me. It caused me to face a whole range of things about what I wanted my life to be going forward. And what was complicated was that the life that I envisioned for myself when we were together, that I saw myself sharing with him, when he was gone, I'd still wanted that life. There was, for my own reasons. And over time, it's been about facing what's mine and what's his, and how do I make it mine? How do I detach it from him so that when I'm moving on with my life in this very different way, it's not kind of constantly yanking on his chain, The Crazy has, been a kind of cross-section of all my relationships because of the lifestyle that I've lived, where I've moved around a lot. I've done, whole different jobs and lived in different houses and different states and different countries. What that kind of amounts to when you're looking at a relationship is you kind of become a bit of a novelty. Everyone kind of gets this exciting story about this exciting world-traveling woman, but because I don't have things like roots or a constant pack of friends, or I kind of find myself always having to adopt their friends and their schedule and their lifestyle because I'm the more flexible one. And then, usually around that 3-4 month mark, the novelty kind of wears off because I go from wanting to be someone who entertains you to someone who means more to you than, that. So, and then people realize that what that means is they're going to have to invest in me. And that's when a lot of them kind of pull it off the table, and I wind up with nothing, because when they go, they take their friends, they take their hobbies, they take their places, they take their music, they take it all with them, and I kind of wind up back at square one, which then leads me to go find a new job and go find a new house and go find new friends and go find new hobbies, which adds to the vicious cycle of me then being more entertaining again and someone picking up on that and wanting to pull me into their life. And you find that you can come across people who just mess you up by having their eyes on other options.
Yeah.
In this day and age, you can literally be on a date with someone and you can hear their other possibilities buzzing away in their pocket. Sometimes they pull out the phone and start chatting to other people on dating apps while you're on the date, because they just want to keep their options open. Like, it's just, it really can pull you to pieces. And I am very sorry about how tricky this recovery from this relationship has been, because it's doing it unlike a way I've ever done it before. And that last line, I misheard the lyrics. I thought it was and as soon as you've rearranged the mess in your head, he will show up looking sane, perfectly sane, and I look crazy. And that's kind of how I look crazy, whereas it's and I know crazy. If I know crazy.
We read the Scarlet stories in the car today planning this episode, and then reread the lyrics, and it really hit home that I'd been reading that wrong too. I mean, not reading it wrong, but just hearing a different emphasis maybe, because I'd always thought of it as when you've rearranged the mess in your head, he'll show up looking sane, perfectly sane. If I know crazy, as in if I know the crazy that's going on inside my head, and so therefore right when I get myself sorted, he's going to screw that up again. But I realized that in Scarlett's personification, like, crazy is his name. It is the character's name. And so turning up right when you get your stuff sorted is what he does. Yeah. And so if I know crazy in that sense, and which changes it a little bit, but I think they're both equally valid.
Absolutely.
As is if I look crazy.
Yeah, I definitely have looked crazy in my time. We talked about a sort of different experience that's been going on. We sort of said, being in crazy territory, we don't necessarily feel like we're in a crazy headspace. This is sort of something that you reflected on.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the last episode because we came into crazy territory, and as you've just heard, like, this song is very much about those experiences where you feel swept up in something and then turned around by how it wasn't actually playing out on the other person's part. But I was quite surprised in that, like, how am I going to approach this song for my time here in the mountains in crazy territory? Because I'm a week or two ago, absolutely, I was so caught up in and pulled in so many different directions on this trip that, crazy would have been the perfect track for elsewhere. But here we were in the mountains, and I was feeling more connected with myself than I ever have. And I was really feeling at a disjunct to the song. And I said that to Bailey and said, like, I'm just not in a crazy headspace. And she said, that's because you're here to repair that.
Yeah, basing it from a different...
That feels so true.
Yeah, that's exactly what, It's a good thing. But speaking of, and the reason why I could say that...
Yes.
Is...
you're having your own crazy little time.
I am, which is... I feel really bizarre talking about... I also believe this person is listening to the podcast. So, hi. Look, it's one of those things where... I'll talk about this. The last time I was in America, I came for 5 days. Actually, this is an even better crazy story, really. I came to America for 5 days when Tori was finishing the Native Invader tour. And I came because I'd connected with this person. You'll all know and love him as Jordan.
Yeah, like, you've talked about this before.
I have. And I came here because I wanted to see if there was something between us. We'd just gotten along so well. We'd known each other for so long. I was just like, let's see what's here. And determined quite quickly and very suddenly and very much in a kind of, once again, that internal ethical, compass kind of going, this person is not, this isn't a flirtation, this isn't a romance, this is something deeper than that. And I found a far deeper friendship with Geordie than I could have imagined. But while I was on that trip, on the last night of the tour, the Drive All Night people hosted the first Torriemos after party with DJ Matteo Sagatti. And whilst there, this person caught my eye. And before I knew it, we were dancing together and we were kissing. And then he came back with us and like slept in our Airbnb and we were talking every day. And then he came out to Australia for 3 weeks. And I won't go into too much of that story because it's highly personal, but suffice to say, things did not go the way that either of us hoped. It became an important but very tumultuous and an uncomfortable, difficult position that we were both in the end, and parted ways, very challenged headspaces. And neither of us had really got what we had bargained for. We'd gotten a lot more and it had become a lot more intense and a lot more kind of painful for us to kind of go through. So bear that in mind when I'm now here again 5 years later and I connect with someone and it literally is like I searched Grindr for the next city we were going to be in because I'd been ghosted so many times and I picked the wrong place and wound up talking to this person and it was like, well, I'm going through that area-ish anyway. Do you want to keep chatting? And
let's just say you picked Washington State, not Washington,
that's
DC.
right, I did. This is Michael teaching us about American geography.
Yeah.
This is
It's an important teachable moment.
So anyway, much to kind of both of our surprise, we're just talking and kept talking and now it's kind of evolved and we're just going from people who are just kind of chatting to now it's like, well, we're connecting and figuring out that there may be something.
Hey, I've had to bear witness to this whole thing.
For goodness sake.
And I have to say that since hitting the mountains, like, they're both leaning into it full tilt.
It definitely feels like there's something blossoming.
I think there's been more playlists swapped than days have passed.
Wow. I'm getting it up from all sides today. But it's just that
But I'm
thing
here
of,
for it.
Yeah, thanks. But it really is, it does feel a lot like letting crazy take a spin and just go, well,
Yeah.
let's just give over to this. There's no expectations. There's very little possibilities. Like, it is just an enjoyment. And, I feel very blessed that this person has given me so much of their time and energy and is now making the effort to come and see me, going out of their way to see me. And I think that having no distractions thing, Tori talks about being in the mountains with Crazy, or Scarlett in the mountains with Crazy. It's just meant that I literally can just kind of listen to these audios and listen to these playlists and just kind of connect to what it is that we're exploring as friends, as people who are interested. I don't know what it is. We're just kind of feeling our way through it, and it's a really nice thing because it is helping me.
I've loved watching what it's done for you because there was a hot minute there after all of those ghostings where you were doubting your worth and like Grindr should never.
Oh my God, there's your advice for Virginia right there. Do not base your value as a person off Grindr interactions.
Yeah.
But it was, speaking of the larger thing, I mean, you've seen me go through it all in the last sort of 6 months and feel very unsure about what I had to offer anybody, and sort of come to this point where I feel I can be open again and can be giddy about something. Like that's something I haven't felt for a while, and having, let's call it what it is, like having a crush on somebody is such a beautiful feeling, but it's especially beautiful when you realize that you didn't know you were going to have it again, and you didn't know when, and suddenly it's now, and it's upon you, and it's thrilling, and it's special. So there's definitely a whole bunch of crazy going on in this trip.
Which clarifies what I was trying to say with my advice for Virginia for this episode. we were discussing the nature of giving advice in the car, and who are we to be offering advice out to the world? And I thought it was the perfect time for us to clarify that all of these advices that we're giving are things that we have learned, not necessarily applied to our own lives. Like, we want to. These are all aspirational for ourselves too. In fact, you might be finding that this podcast is quite self-serving in a way, because it is a conversation between us as friends trying to help each other through this. Yeah. And so you just all get to listen into it.
But I think on that, I've done a few things like this in the past, and what I've learned from people is that when they realize that while we're having a conversation, we're having that conversation with those people in mind, and it offers people an intimacy that they're never going to get anywhere else. If they're seeing a panel or reading a book or any of those things, it's the way that you speak to a friend, especially friends as close as we are, it's going to be a lot more frank, a lot more earnest, much more sincere and intimate and deep, and the reflections are going to be so much more powerful for that. I think the advice stuff, really came from a place of like, this is what we wish we'd known.
Yeah.
What we would say to our younger selves.
Our younger selves, exactly.
But at the same time, it was an important thing for us to acknowledge that what is this advice intended to do? And if, we're not trying to guide anyone actually in their lives. Like, we're not trying to actually tell you what you should or shouldn't do in a relationship. We don't expect it to kind of be looked at as that kind of advice, because we acknowledge that
we don't know you.
Yeah, well, there's that. But we also don't regret the experiences that we've had as such. Like, I
do a few.
Yeah, fair. But on the whole, we understand that we had to go through the things we had to go through to be where we are now. And, you don't get good at relationships unless you fuck up. You can't find unbridled joy without experiencing a bit of sadness.
Oh yeah.
And failing. Yeah, I can't remember who gave me this great advice, but it was along the lines of, there's no such thing as success. There's just failing a whole bunch. And like, that's what happens. Like, you're succeeding until you're not anymore, and then you do something else. Like, it's just, you're always, even the most successful people have failed a heap and feel like they're failing at the time, and are learning from their failures as they go along. That's really what it's about.
So, I guess I was having a hard time in the car articulating what my advice for this episode would be. And it's come to me that, because I didn't want to discourage people from leaning into these experiences when they come your way, and living life to the fullest. Like, I'm not trying to make people so cautious that they shut themselves down.
Yeah.
Because I do think there is such beautiful joy in opening up to people that you meet in your life. So I guess, like, live the song like Scarlett does, but just bear in mind that part where he says, first let's just unzip your religion down. In the song, it doesn't actually say whether or not she consents to that, or it actually happens. Like, be sure you're checking in with yourself that what you are unzipping and opening up to whoever is what you are willing to give.
Yeah.
Otherwise, by all means, jump all in.
Yeah, I think on that point as well, we've said this advice in a bunch of different ways, but it's like, someone who really cherishes you and is really passionate about who you are doesn't require you to unzip your religion, doesn't require you to give up your values or your truths or your experiences in order to find you attractive or worthwhile for them to spend time with. So if they're asking you to unzip your religion down, it's probably not not going to be what you want it to be, because I suppose the issue is then it's not you in the experience. It's a version of you. It's a compromised you, and you're kind of. Yeah, does that make sense? Like, it's just...
Yeah, well, we were talking today about our relationship when we were together.
Yeah.
And it is honestly the first relationship that I've ever had where I didn't feel like I needed to change who I was, or I was allowed my own opinion and, like, to say yes or no to things, and my opinion was valued. Yeah. And so it was a turning point for me, because you weren't asking me to unzip my religion, so to speak.
No, not at all. And I think that's why our relationship has lasted the way that it has.
Yeah.
Because we came into it with our full selves, regardless of even at points how ugly that could be, or how terrifying it was to be that vulnerable. Because we could be so deeply honest. Yeah, it was, yeah. Good times. My advice to Virginia was to just appreciate, when it comes to a relationship, just appreciate it for what it is. I've had so many conversations with people about, oh, I wonder if it will get more serious, or will it, will there be more sex in it, or will it be this, or will it go here, or, and it's like, just appreciate it for what it is. I think be present. My biggest, I don't say regret, but like, if I could do it over my last relationship, and let's not put it that way, in my next relationship, the behavior that I really want to shift as an improvement from how I behaved in my last relationship is I won't be journaling as much. I won't be Carrie Bradshawing my way through my relationship and sort of continually intellectualizing it and creating a narrative about where in the love story I'm up to in this engagement. I just want to be present to what it is and not feel the need for it to meet any kind of fairy story or achieve any kind of goals or present itself in any particular way other than just enjoy it for what it is. Which, is a lesson that I'm learning now. There's no harm in just feeling the fullness of whatever it is that you are offered, whatever is available to you. Just enjoy it. You can't really change people.
No.
So, if you meet, a cowboy on the road who, has a wandering eye and all these sorts of things, that's not someone who you want to envision a relation, a long-term marriage with, because of all the things that appeal to you about him. He's
Sorry, I'm stifling a Kat and Kim quote.
Oh, please, let it rip.
Kel used to have a wandering eye, but he got it fixed with laser surgery, which is nice.
Oh dear, Phoenix, who's a great advice giver and very frequently drops the truth bombs. Certainly on my life was like, don't change the story because someone lays the pipe right. Just because you're getting something out of this relationship that you want doesn't mean that you should or have to twist the rest of it to keep it in the realms of what you want.
We've also got a fantastic interview with Ryan Crawford.
Who we love.
We love.
So very much.
We're looking forward to spending time with him in Seattle. But here is his thoughts. Here are his thoughts. Here are thoughts.
Here his thoughts are.
By Ryan Crawford. In Seattle, I got to talk with Ryan Crawford, and I promise you we get to talking about crazy eventually. You just have to bear with us while we get our crazy out, you might say. But here's that fantastic talk. Well, here we are in Seattle.
Here we are.
Talking with Ryan Crawford.
Yes.
Who messaged while we were driving up through the Rockies and was like, if it's not too late, I want to talk to you about crazy.
I was listening to your podcast on my morning run, like I do, and I was like, oh shit, like I hope they haven't talked about crazy yet, like in the recordings.
When
I
you
hadn't heard
messaged,
it.
we were in crazy territory, so we were still experiencing and processing.
It's fate.
And so I was like, yeah, of course, like we're also like several episodes behind, so I won't even edited crazy by the time we reach you. So
That worked out perfectly.
yeah, here we are talking about crazy.
Yes.
Ryan has just shown me around the neighborhood.
Yeah, what do you think of Capitol Hill, Seattle?
It's cute and fun and hilly, and no, I like it. I mean, you took me to 2 bookshops, so you've won me over.
That was the plan.
Head over feet, as Alanis would say.
Aww. Don't be surprised.
Don't be surprised.
If I love you.
And your bookshops, head over feet.
Which, luckily, you did not fall head over feet on the hills, because they
Oh,
do be steep.
they're quite hills.
Yeah.
Capital, even.
All of the hills. We've got Capitol, First Hill, Beacon Hill, Cherry Hill. This is the city of hills.
So it sounds like a lot of those hills were competing for number one place.
Capitol won
First
out.
and Beacon, they all sound like look at me, look at me.
100%. But then Kate Bush arrived on the foggy shores of Seattle in 18 however many. And she said, that's the one. And I'm going to run up it. And she fucking did. And to this day, and what the legend goes.
And then, she inspired Stranger Things, right?
100%. Well, that came much later.
Yeah, okay.
But she stood, legend has it, she stood atop Capitol Hill and she said, Capital, Capital, Capital. And that became Capitol Hill.
But that was after she went up first.
Right. So she was a bit out of breath. So she said, Capital, Capital.
And then Cherry Tree's like, what am I, chopped liver?
That's 100% how it happened, yeah.
Yeah.
This is real history. This is true facts.
You heard it. Well, we've all learned so far that Michael's geography lessons of America, top notch.
Right. Yeah, they're certified by genuine historians.
You can't even Google the shit that I tell you, like.
Because it doesn't exist.
No, it's dark web shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's fancy. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah, I had to school people on the difference between Dallas and Houston, and by people I mean myself.
Well, you're a people,
I am people.
and also like you're new to the U.S., so that's okay. I had to Google the difference, like how far apart Perth was from Sydney. Because I was like, oh, like, wouldn't it be so great if we
Quite a
toured?
ways.
Turns out, a continent away. I was like, oh, maybe we could just road trip it to Perth, like
Well,
on
you
our way
could
from
if you
Melbourne
had like 3 weeks.
through the bush.
Well, like if you just set out and drove, you could actually get it done in like maybe 3 days. No, that's probably a lie. I'd give yourself 5 to be comfortable.
I'd fly.
Yeah,
Is
it's
just
4
where
or
it would
5
go.
hours. There we go.
Yeah.
And boom, you're there.
And what?
Boom. Boom.
Oh yeah.
You're there.
Oh, I thought this
Whoomp,
was.
there it is.
I thought this was like
There
one
she
of those
goes again.
Australian sayings.
No.
No, just
Just
boom.
my
You're
weird
there.
accent, I guess.
Your accent is wonderful.
Well, should I go into voice modeling?
Voice modeling? Yes.
It's a
not even
career.
voice acting, just modeling what the voice looks like. Yeah, you should do that.
I created the career just now. I'm
a voice model
trailblazer
and
and a
a-
pioneer.
And a hand actor. Yeah, this is a shining career for sure. After the podcast, though. After the podcast
Yeah.
and the book, then the next venture in your career.
Is voice modeling.
Yeah, perfect.
I'll just make myself some business cards, I think.
What would they? But they won't look like anything.
Michael, voice model. No contact details.
This feels like a Christopher Guest movie. Like that this would be an actual job with Parker Posey.
No, Jennifer Coolidge would have the voice modeling.
Oh, yeah. She'd be great at
She
it.
could just do anything. Also, we've been talking 5 minutes and haven't yet talked about
Okay, maybe we should talk about crazy.
crazy. Tell me all the things. Open the Pandora's box of crazy.
We're in her aquarium. Here we
Pandora's a crazy.
go.
Well, Bailey's at the aquarium currently.
Oh, she sure is.
Yep.
We'll let
getting
her talk about that.
Yeah, she can open up her own aquarium.
Her own Pandora's box, if you will.
Anywho, crazy.
Yeah. So I love Scarlet's Walk. I love this record. And Crazy is a shining beacon for me on this album. It came out, 2002? So I was in high school. And this was, post 9/11 US. And this album comes out from my favorite singer, Tori, who I had just discovered for myself in 98, so just a few years prior. And in that time I came out, I had changed friend groups a couple of times to try and find the right fit, and navigated joint custody between my parents and new schools and all of that stuff. So it was a lot of tumult, and then 9/11 Jesus, on top of all of that, it was
Yeah.
rocked and rolled all of us. So to have this album come out after Strange Little Girls, to process 9/11 was a really big deal. And not only was it about the US, but it was about the land of North America, and it was about women's relationships to men, and about women's relationships to themselves, and about queer friends and queerness in general. It was just so wide open. This as wide open as
The landscape.
the landscape, exactly. And I fell into it. And my first critique, I remember listening to it, and my stepmom walks in, and she's like, "What do you think? Do you like it?" And I said, all the songs kind of sound the same, maybe." And I wasn't in love with it at first. And then after sitting with the record for a couple of days and just diving in, it really took root, like forever, and has become easily one of my top 2 Tory records. Between this and Choir Girl, they kind of bounce back and forth.
Yeah, they're my top 2.
Are they really?
Yeah.
I feel like they're really, especially for our age group, I feel like
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
really commonly the top 2. And in my opinion, from a songwriting perspective and from a melodic and production perspective, but also from a vocal perspective, she was really, in my opinion, at the top of her game vocally.
I once had a friend say that they weren't in love with Scarlet's Walk because they felt every song ended, like didn't have a strong end to the song. Like she kind of just slows down and peters out. And until he said that, I hadn't even noticed.
Yeah.
And now I know it's there, but I also feel like it fits in thematically because like these are all thoughts and passing moments, and sometimes they do just slow down and then you're like, oh, hang on, and it's gone. And so, I don't know, it doesn't bother me in the slightest.
It sort of trails, when you can examine it in that way, it's easier, I think, to appreciate it, that it sort of, each song trails off like a drive.
Yeah.
This is the quintessential American road trip album. Like it's for that.
Yeah.
And that was my the reason why I thought all the songs sounded the same at first was because of that trail off choice at the end of each song. It was easy to sort of, I don't know, to be
like,
unimpressed with it at first.
Who doesn't love a dramatic end?
Right, they can't
Like
all be slamming a piano
cut
shut.
it again.
Right.
Yeah.
God, I fucking love that song. You'll hear me and Dan Verdeja tonight talk about that and how we sing it. We sing She's Your Cocaine like every time we're at Madison Pub or at C Seattle's, a local
Right.
queer bar.
She's Your Cocaine was playing in the car yesterday as we were driving to Seattle. We had decided to do a Nothing But Tory shuffle.
Love it.
And that one was playing and we were both singing along, and then towards the end she just gets really vocal and we both were leaning into it in a like basically let's have orgasms sort of way.
Sure, like you do.
Because that's how it sounds. Like she's like, yeah. And it's like, okay, this is how she gets off.
Yeah.
Fair. And then she ends with cut it again. And I was like, you should end all of your orgasms with cut it again.
Kick him out and be like, cut it again.
Cut it again.
That little guitar riff. Oh,
funny.
Cut to me in a week doing that.
Yeah.
With somebody who's never heard of Tori Amos in his life. He'll be like, what? I'll be like, don't worry about it.
Yes.
That's amazing.
So why Crazy specifically then?
Thank you so much for continuing to bring me back to this because I keep on getting so tangential. I could talk about this for hours.
Hey, like, I have ADHD. The fact that we're even considering talking about what we sat here to talk about.
that we
is-
actually have a plan.
Yeah.
This is a miracle, y'all.
Yeah.
I love it. Go us.
Yeah.
Won't he do it? So Crazy stood out to me. It feels like a sister song to Virginia and Carbon, which are my 2 favorite songs from the record. And I feel maybe I think Carbon is the best song she's ever created. Like, it just hands down. But Crazy offers a sort of potential glimpse into the danger of like, oh, like what would it be like to just succumb just for a second, you know? Or conversely, the danger of challenging a relationship and entertaining the idea of leaving it. And there's this sort of duality for it. for me, Crazy at first, when I first heard it as a teenager, I was thinking, oh, it's a love song. And presumably Scarlett is singing to, this man, AKA Tori singing to Mark. And it's like, oh, I'm not saying that I'm not charmed. Like, you're charming and you're worth the fall. But I was alone when I figured out that we're in it forever. And, paper tigers came alive and it became this like romantic idea. And at the time I was thinking of this song as sort of coming together and being tempted back into a relationship. And that, oh, who cares? Damn what everybody else will think. I'm going to give Crazy a spin and I'm going to give this relationship a shot. It wasn't until later, reading interviews from Tori about the song and also just living some experience and listening to it a little more deeply and realizing now I believe the song is about wanting to pull away from a relationship, or at least entertaining the thought of pulling away from a relationship, saying, listen, bub, I'm not saying you're not charming, and I'm not saying that it wasn't worth it. This has been great, but I've been on my own in this experience, in these feelings for a really long time, and I have been reliving moments about our relationship, and a lot is dawning on me. Dipping into Wednesday a little bit, maybe.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Tying
Yeah.
in.
Oh, yes.
And then...
When you paint it like that, I can see the Wednesday parallels.
Yeah. Of just the distraction and being in your own thoughts. And then the craziness that she's talking... I don't like to use the word often because it's ableist, but for the sake of the song, I will.
She uses Crazy as a name. It is a character personified whose name is Crazy.
100%.
So that's how I've come to terms with that.
And this man, I'd love to hear what you think this man Crazy, or even if if they are gendered, what vision you have for this person. I see this character as, she uses he, him pronouns, I think, for him. So I see him as like this, like Marlboro man, big old belt buckle from the Bible Belt, like outside Texas.
Oh, really?
And he's just tempting her away from her relationship, and she's just thinking, like, what would it be like? I'm fantasizing. What would my life be like if I just ran out right now and shacked up with this guy and threw it all away? Like, what would be the harm in that?
That's not at all how I picture Crazy.
How do you picture him?
He's more like a slick, wild, sort of bad guy who's like transient and moving, and like the idea is you either jump into his car for a time, but like you can't perpetually live on the go like that. And so, but also I'm finding this conversation fascinating because the whole time Bailey and I's interpretation of it is somewhat similar in that we see it as a post-breakup.
Oh, interesting.
Like, Crazy was wild. You got caught up in this relationship. You really got swept away, and it was charming, and you were great. And then you left me. And so, like, what am I to do with all of this? Like, and like, you can't regret everything, but also, it fucking hurts.
Interesting. And so you feel like Craziness might be, or Crazy the character.
Crazy the character is this sort of guy who breezes in and then...
After the breakup.
No, who is the relationship. And then is like, moves on for his own reasons without realizing he has built up something within you. And then right when you get your mess in your head sorted... he'll look up looking perfectly sane. If I know Crazy.
That's a fascinating read on it. And I could definitely see, it's got legs. Like I could definitely see that being
but it's like,
a viable connection.
That's how we interpret it. And like the way you were describing it just made so much sense to me as well. That whole wanting to pull away, but loving the danger of the situation at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to fill in the space of this song. And I think of it as, there's different lenses we could apply. One lens would be Scarlett is as the woman who is singing to her man, whoever he may be, whatever another name for red might be, Garnet, let's call him, Vermilion. Vermilion and Scarlett shacking up, but she's...
Carmen Sandiego.
Carmen Sandiego? In that red trench coat.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
I love. And she's singing to him. He's the object of the song, or the person she's singing to, but then she's singing about this other man, Crazy. And so when I think of it that way, I think of Temptation's Girl, and this whole song being about temptation, unzipping your religion down, being coaxed away from something that might seem stable and secure, but is also dissatisfying in some way. And in a relational context, being and entertaining doubt, being exposed to doubt and entertaining it, and wondering, what am I sticking around here for? Is this satisfying, or is this a problem? What if I just sold your car while you were at work, and I bought a plane ticket, and I flew my ass to Bora Bora, and I became a drummer in a band? Like, that sort of like filling in the thoughts that one leaves. Have you ever had the moment in a relationship where you're waiting for a call back or a text back, or you're somewhere...
Only every second of every day.
Has this ever happened? Maybe like ever in your life, ever? I don't know, maybe...
Sorry, maybe you should finish the sentence before I like jump in on that.
No, I want to hear, but like, to, I guess, finish coloring the context, I think of this song, if I think, away from just a song about a woman talking about a different man to her current man, if we think of it as like a psychological experience and this state of feeling crazy because of a relationship, I think of that moment when you're waiting and you're sitting next to the phone and you're like, why hasn't he texted back? Why? I saw that they saw the message, but there's no response yet. And they leave you on red. These damn
youths.
These youths of today.
Don't know how to converse with people.
It's so frustrating, and it is so anxiety provoking, and it unfortunately invites so much doubt and what do I want to say? The inversion, or like bringing it against yourself and thinking, this must be my fault. I'm not enough.
What did I do?
Exactly. Did I say something wrong?
Yeah.
It's so anxiety provoking, and I think of this song as maybe being a reflection of that experience of like, what does the mind do when you're left alone to fill in the blank and the other person isn't helping you with it? Or maybe you haven't even invited the other person to help you with it. You're just in your own head, and suddenly paper tigers are scaring you and they're coming alive, and you feel pulled into this crazy making experience.
This is incredible. This is just making the song so much deeper for me, because it's...
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interpretation that I had not considered, but absolutely can apply to my own experience. So great. This is why we talk to other people about Tory songs.
It takes a village.
Indefinitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a constant... And that's the thing. This album came out 20 years ago, and we're still talking about it.
We're not done.
No,
We're far from done.
One of my favorite, more recent interpretations is not Scarlett as the woman, and not necessarily this cognitive experience of Scarlett as the brain, of like, oh, what is it like to be in this head? But Scarlett as the land. And when I think of it...
Scarlett as the land is a fascinating way to approach this
Isn't
whole
it?
album.
When y'all were talking about Virginia, that especially nailed that lens for me of like, oh, wow.
Well, that's interesting, because in the narrative, Scarlett is actively talking to the land. But then to put Scarlett in the land's shoes, talking to that portion of the land, like, it's fascinating. Yeah, like we could go down a giant rabbit hole there.
We could. Luckily, the rabbit warren doesn't have to go too deep. But if we think the one, I guess, thought that I had most recently when thinking about the land lens through Scarlet, and with Crazy in particular, was actually more hopeful. I thought of it as this sort of relationship with colonial history in the US
Yeah.
and elsewhere, but in Scarlet's case, the US, and this idea of unzipping your religion down. When I think of Scarlet as entertaining Crazy, entertaining this tempting man to tempt her away from, you know, whoever is neglecting her or being cold or just failing to understand her, he can invite her to consider a different perspective or consider a different way of life. And I thought, how wonderful would it be if Scarlet had this moment of Crazy coming in, you know, metaphorically giving her some great dick, like she felt so good about it, and she no longer has to feel tied to the puritanical history of the US and the colonial history of this geography, and instead could be connected. Her religion is unzipped now. It's fully zipped down, and she can go back to the original theology of the land or the gods of this land, or entertain new ones, or, in my opinion, maybe the best yet, live without them and unzip that religion fully down and now be naked without any sort of religious ties.
One point that I did make in the episode that this will be a part of is that what I love about that refrain is that it hits so hard. He said, first, let's just unzip your religion down. And like, has been so devastating for me for personal reasons for so long. But when you stop to think about it, he's said that, and you never know what her response is. You don't know if she did unzip her religion, whether she consented to it, whether it went ahead, or whether she said no and walked away, or how she felt about it if she did. Like, maybe she let it happen, but she was perfectly okay in doing so. And the fact that there's that much space in the song for all of those to coexist, I think makes this so brilliant in being able to bring your own experience to it and take what you need from it. Obviously, any of those interactions messes with you a bit because, like, it is a heady, you get swept up in it kind of experience with this character who's called Crazy. And so after your interaction, when you're alone, it does take you a while to sort your own thoughts out. And then maybe he reappears, but maybe by the time he reappears, like, your head is sorted and you're able to handle him that time. Or maybe you go through it all again.
Because every time he is showing up looking real sane.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a good thing and it's actually granting you true sanity. Or maybe he's gaslighting you, or you're allowing yourself to be duped.
Yeah.
And he's not actually sane.
Precisely.
Just rife.
Yeah. You could just read it any which way and all of them are valid and wonderful and rich. And I love that. Thank you so much for talking crazy with me.
I've really loved getting crazy with you.
Yeah. Let's get crazy.
Let's get real crazy.
Real crazy. Have you got like some brewskis?
Oh God, no, honey. This is a gay household. And as Tori says,
White
beer
Claw.
tastes like horse piss. I literally do have White Claw in my fridge right now. Your Honor, I was attacked.
I made Mike very mad the other day. He banned me because he was talking about what alcoholic beverages do we like. And it led to this weird exchange about the idiom about not looking a gift horse in the mouth, and which I can see from your face you're not that familiar with.
Oh, no, I'm
you know it?
familiar with the idiom.
Okay, anyway.
But I'm just wondering how, like, did somebody make you drink something you didn't want to drink?
No, I was like, there are some alcohols I don't particularly like, but also gift horses and all of that.
Oh, yes.
That was my response. And
Yeah.
he was like, what do you mean? And I explained the idiom and where it came from. And then he's like, are you saying my booze is old?
Oh,
and
God.
I was like, well, isn't that a good thing? Like, wines and stuff, wines and like fortified liquors, and he's like, it's all in the corking process, and I'm like,
Oh.
I don't know what the process is with White Claw. And he's like, banned.
Barrel-aged White Claw. Shade-grown, free trade.
Anyway, I was just being a shit stirrer, and I entertained myself greatly.
We love that. Yeah. We love it.
Hi, Mike. We'll see you soon.
Love you, Mike.
With all that said and done,
Let's swap some songs.
well, mine were. I actually wanted to. I had some songs set out for this, but I think I'm going to sort of bump a few, because as we were talking and reading the stories, I came up with some other ones that inspired me. And there's a bit of a duo that I'm presenting. One is "Cowboy Take Me Away" by the Chicks, and in this song really is literally what it says on the tin. It's a fantasy about finding someone who will just kind of fly you as high as you can, and set you free, and kind of take you on this big adventure. And that's kind of what is kind of happening in Crazy. So I think they match really well. But I also wanted to throw in there "Where Have All the Cowboys Gone" by Paula Cole, which I call, I say is like a white woman's fast car. It's just a very similar narrative by a white woman. But it is a story about, meeting someone and being very taken with them, and then kind of
Getting married, and then it all just slowing down.
Yeah, there's this idea about a cowboy being so chivalrous and courteous and sexy and romantic and freewheeling, but there's a price that kind of comes with that, and you kind of, if you can't kind of live in just the fantasy, there's always another side, and you sort of find that you try and pin this person down, ignoring all of what you know about them and what brought them into your life. And then you find yourself, with years wasted and in the same kind of shitty situation that you thought that he could take you out of.
Yeah.
So I felt like those two kind of came together. The other one that I wanted to share, actually there were two. One that came up while we were talking was "Turning Tables" by Adele, which is just a song about exactly that, someone who kind of flips the switch on you but is kind of always getting close and always kind of leading you on, and then turns things around. It's just such a beautiful song. But the last one is a song that I love personally. I'm very excited because it's my first Moona addition to the playlist. I love Moona front to back. They're just my favorite band, and I think, if Tracy Chapman isn't my Anne Brun, in terms of, can listen to any song and just love it, Moona is right up there. And there's a song they do called "Crying on the Bathroom Floor," but they did an acoustic cover of it, and it is on Spotify, and we'll put it on the playlist, and it's just beautiful. And there's, the sort of the main bridge, it just talks about, the chorus into the bridge is, "When I'm crying on the bathroom floor, tearing off the dress I wore, I wonder if I could ever ask for more, if I'm ever going to ask for more from a lover. It's taken a lot out of me loving you." And it's just that very essence of this, where it's like, God, like this relationship has changed who I am, has driven me crazy. And sometimes that's kind of necessary, but it's about, you do need to keep your eye on, what's that line from Practical Magic? Love is like when you spin and spin and spin, and it feels amazing, but if you don't, mind your bearings, if you don't keep your eyes on something still, you can't see that you're going to fall.
Yeah. The first song that popped into my head was "Heaven" by Troye Sivan, because it ties in with that religion aspect and the choosing religion and sexuality. The chorus of that song says, "How am I going to get to heaven without losing a piece of me? Or without losing a piece of me, how will I get to heaven?" And so, yeah, it speaks very strongly to me on that line. Another one that came off a playlist that I've made for myself for this trip called Reflections was called "Is All Your Gold" by Bat for Lashes. This very much felt, this song, just, I really get it on a number of levels, because I felt like I had given so much of myself in the past that I had nothing left to give, and I wondered whether I would be able to
Absolutely.
be in a relationship again where I'm giving what that person is worth. But I'm just recently realizing that that gold is mine. Like, it's a renewable resource.
Yeah, well, there's the line in the second verse is, am I ever going to let him go and get my gold back? And it's that moment, like, that's what it takes, letting go of. And I think that's what you're sort of doing over time. And so, like, the more you.
And then the last song, this song I felt narrated my life a lot while I was in the relationship. And I think it also speaks to that kind of crazy energy, is I Am Not a Robot by Marina, formerly Marina and the Diamonds. On the CD that I own, it's Marina and the Diamonds.
Ah, memories. The artist formerly known as.
The artist formerly known as. Or it's no longer the band involved, it's my music, mine. I don't know what the relationship is or why the change. But anyway, that's not the discussion we're having right now. Because this song very much spoke to how I perceived my ex to conduct himself. He was very much putting on airs, and like, I could see behind the facade because I lived with him, and even though he hid things from me, like, I saw the way he toughened up around people and tried to wear big boy pants in, like, social settings and in professional settings, even though I didn't really think he necessarily had the ground to stand on. But in this way of being, it was like he treated me like I would just accept all of that, and to a degree I did, but like, I had to keep reminding myself I'm not a robot. Like, I am vulnerable, and actually so are you, and so let's just be honest with each other.
Yeah, for sure. Great stuff.
Crazy.
Well, we yeah, crazy, you might say. So we're now in strange territory, and we will be right up until
Wednesday.
Yeah, which kicks off
Wednesday territory, which we get to on Sunday.
Yeah.
And who knows what day of the week you'll actually get this episode or listen to it. So, what is time?
That's exactly right. It's a wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for hanging in there with us. We are on the sort of home stretch of season 1, which feels really wild to say. Once again, you can always support us in making this kind of content. These playlists are independently made. Literally, I drive across the country for hours while Michael, edits out all the ums and ahs and puts everything together, and ropes in Matt Katz's beautiful, intro. Like, this is all self-produced, and we're not funded to do any of this. We've ostensibly, I'm not working at this point. Like, I haven't earned any money through this period. We really are, just flying by the seat of our pants here. We've let a whole other force take a spin for us here. So support through the GoFundMe means a lot. Support through our direct creative channels means a lot. But at this point,
Patreon for future projects if you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Bailey's got all sorts of ways you can. We've talked about it.
We have indeed, but I imagine most people who are listening by now have donated to the GoFundMe, and so this is the part where, as we enter the home stretch, we really are trying to make sure we get home, and we make that sort of happen, and we have that best kind of last experience, and recover on the other side of the trek. This is where sharing what you see makes a huge difference. If there's an episode of the podcast that means something to you, please share it around and tag us so we know.
For example, like. I just want to illustrate this with a point. I personally love Rosie Thomas, the singer. She's incredible, and then she basically quit making music for a decade or more, and it was devastating to me as a fan, but I just had to lean on what music I had of hers already. She had children, and her priorities shifted, and all of her reasons are valid. And just in the last year, she has started releasing music again, and it's very beautiful and inspired by her family life. But just a couple of months ago, she released the first episode of a podcast that she started doing on parenting. and I don't listen to podcasts pretty much at all, which is funny. But
You listen to ours though, right?
I have to.
I've already done my part.
But I listened to this podcast, because I love Rosie Thomas so much, and she's hilarious. And I'm like, I don't even want children. Why am I listening to a podcast about parenting? But it is everything, and it's all about anxieties, and you don't have to be a parent to listen to it. And I told everyone to listen. I forced people to listen to it. And now I know at least a handful of my friends are listening to it on the regular, because I made a big thing about it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if we're doing that for you, I know I'm not Rosie Thomas.
Look,
I
and
can
look,
aspire
and
to
look,
be.
and look, and if the podcast is shit, we totally get it. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're not going to base our value judgment on it. But I'm just saying, if
Yeah,
there's
if
anything
you
more that
are
you can do,
enjoying
and
it.
you feel sharing it, that means a great deal to us, because it brings more people into the broader journey.
Because we can't afford to pay for promotion of this podcast.
That's right.
We're barely paying for the trip. So this is not a sponsored post.
This podcast was brought to you by our last friggin' buck, which we're happy about.
And a free platform.
Yeah, thank fuck. So look, if it's at that point where you've donated all your bits and bobs, that's really wonderful, and we appreciate everyone who's repeat donated. It's a bit wild to us, but that's another way that you can help us, is by sharing that you've been listening to this, and who knows what kind of humans will enjoy two queers talking about Tori Amos and relationships and trauma and healing and America. There's a few things in there that I think people can enjoy. America. We'll see you in Strangetown.
Yeah, we should stop talking now. The Michael's Walk podcast acknowledges that the journey they are undertaking takes place on the sacred and unceded nations of many proud Indigenous peoples. From the lands of the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, we are fortunate to call home, to each and every Native American tribe's land we'll set foot on as we travel. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and humbly acknowledge their sovereignty.